reconnaissance plane is just taking pictures of something that hasn't existed for over 40 years.
The crew of a nuclear aircraft carrier find that they've been transported back to December of 1941, where they could, in theory, repel the attack on Pearl Harbor. Time anomalies are not that unheard of. I myself am stuck in a temporal loop where I end up reliving the same day over and over again, where I just end up watching Uncle Buck on VHS every single day. Of course, in my case, it's because I'm absolutely too lazy to get up to change the tape.
It's crazy.
It's a fun story about time travel where nobody involved with the film really wanted to get into the weeds about the perils of time travel.
Why's that?
The final countdown.
We're at General Quarters because I don't have any idea what's happened.
The Final Countdown, directed by Don Taylor, is a film that probably has the coolest premise ever if you were 10. It has great footage of life on board an aircraft carrier, features a strong cast, all that good stuff. But it does manage to avoid any major discussion of what is actually going on, how to deal with it, and what are the ramifications of any of it. It's still a cool film, but yes, it does tend to squander a really interesting premise. What if a modern naval vessel faced up against World War II level technology?
We're about to fight a battle that was lost before most of you were born.
If you're interested in characters working the problem, discussing the pros and cons of different types of action, and expressing wonder at this fantastic predicament they found themselves in, well, there is a little teeny bit of that here and there, but there's way more jet fighter porn. A civilian, Warren Lasky, is given the job by his employer, the mysterious Mr. Tideman of Tideman Industries, where he's to observe and report on efficiencies of the nuclear aircraft carrier, the USS Nimitz. Captain Matthew Yelland isn't too fussed on having a civilian analyst on board, but whatever, those knuckleheads in the Navy can just kiss his ass if they think he's going to give a damn. However, Yelland, being passed over for promotion several times, has not in any way made him belligerent or bitter. Commander Richard Owen is in overall charge of the pilots, and he's also writing his own history on the attack on Pearl Harbor. Owen will take an instant dislike to the pushy and nosy civvy, Lasky.
Go to hell, Lasky.
Go to hell yourself.
The Nimitz passes through an unusual storm which soon clears, but then the crew start to notice things that can only be described as unusual, off, or concerning. There is no comms traffic apart from AM radio broadcasts, and even then it's old vintage programs.
Jack Benny?
The crew are quite shaken. Has a nuclear war started?
We're at war.
You always talking shit.
Or is it something far worse, like the console wars? Did Sega really have a better sound chip in their 16-bit consoles compared to Nintendo? Or was the winning blow the Super FX chip?
In theory.
In theory.
A reconnaissance flyover of Pearl Harbor has even more unusual results when the photos reveal a fully intact USS Arizona, among other things. They slowly work out that the storm has brought them back to 1941.
Let's get some air.
In the plot room.
Let's go to CIC.
Meanwhile, Senator Chapman, his secretary Laurel Scott, and her dog are the only survivors of a yacht attacked by Japanese fighters. The Zeros are downed by fighters from the Nimitz, with a survivor also rescued by a second chopper. Or is it the same chopper? I mean, that could have been an awkward ride. Senator Chapman doesn't believe what's going on and is making a lot of noise about being returned to Pearl Harbor.
I suggest, asshole, that you stop impersonating some other asshole.
The captain has decided they have no choice but to fend off the attack they know is coming to Pearl Harbor, while Owen has the job of planting the Senator and Laurel on a deserted island where they'll be safe. Except Chapman managed to blow up the damn helicopter, marooning Owen and Laurel on the island. I mean, I wonder what they're going to do for the next 40 years. Oh, right. Just as Nimitz prepares to fend off the Japanese attack, the storm reappears, lucky that, and insists on gobbling up the vessel. This method of time travel does not seem particularly pleasant, with terrible side effects on the crew's balance, brain functions, and bowels. The Nimitz ends up back where it started, and more crucially, when it started, the year 1980. Back at Pearl Harbor, Lasky finally gets to meet his employer, who of course turns out to be Owen, along with Laurel.
The possibility that what's happening here is real.
The Final Countdown. I love The Final Countdown. It's a film where there isn't an actual specific countdown per se. There's the imminent attack on Pearl Harbor, but there aren't any close-ups of stopwatches or some character whose only story function is to fill gaps by reading out numbers that decrease in increments commensurate with those on a timer in your kitchen that you would use to make sure you don't burn the milk.
Get on with it.
So here's a likeable film, a very likeable film, filled with potential. But of course, it doesn't really explore any of the fascinating issues about a nuclear carrier being at Pearl Harbor. We just see a lot of footage of crew dressed like Wiggles doing Navy things. The Final Countdown is a Douglas thing. Kirk Kirk Douglas had been one of the biggest stars in the world, but by the early 80s he was definitely in that weird phase of either trying to remain a lead or to transition to character actor roles. Of course, it was his production shingle, the Briner Company, that made the film, with the actor's son Peter Douglas producing. It was the younger Douglas who had connections to the Navy, whereby the production was able to film on the real USS Nimitz. Hence, there are no sets in the film, everything was shot on the real aircraft carrier. With the Navy giving so much help, there is almost nothing in this film that shows the Navy in anything other than a positive light. This is some of the nicest footage of the actual 1980s era Navy that you'll see anywhere. There are lots of shots of the crew scrambling, fighters landing and taking off, and even a fighter almost crashing. Many actual Nimitz crew members played small roles. At times it almost feels like a Navy procedural, except a lot of it is oddly impersonal. We don't really see much of the other fighter pilots, and aside from, 7 or 8 roles, hardly anyone has more than a line or two of dialogue which they could use to create a character. Perhaps characters aren't really needed in the film that is mostly footage of planes launching or people walking from one room to another, then saying a few words before walking to a different room. There is the possibility that this is a film where 90% of it is made up of establishing shots.
What the hell's going on here?
Kirk Douglas as Yelland is fairly sedate. Almost nobody disagrees with him. I mean, he is the captain, he could have you shot, but he doesn't seem to know what's going on and seems to think his only possible course of action is to unilaterally take on the Japanese fleet without orders from the Navy of the day.
Now what do we do about it?
As for Yelland's apparently cluelessness,
I don't know.
part of me does think he's the inspiration for Lloyd Bridges' character in Hot Shots.
Oh, the man moving. Roy.
James Farentino as Dick Owen knows his World War II history, where he's party to details such as Senator Chapman originally having mysteriously disappeared back in 1941. Charles Durning was the doomed senator, somebody who could possibly have become vice president, but instead ends up as that idiot who blew up the chopper. Katherine Ross was Laurel, someone smarter than most of the people she worked with, and I'm pretty sure she knows not to light a cigarette with a flare gun in a chopper. Ron O'Neill was Commander Thurman, Sunteko was the Japanese pilot, and in a small role, the associate producer Lloyd Kaufman, who of course would later start Troma Films.
I'm talking about the classic paradox of time.
Martin Sheen as Lasky has an odd role where he's not the main character for most of the movie, but ends up being the person from whose perspective the story is told. Lasky is the guy who first suggests they're back in 1941, that they could perhaps use the knowledge of the next 40 years, and that they could be attacking the fleet.
Think of the firepower of the USS Nimitz back in 1941.
Owen is the only person suggesting they should just leave time alone.
Things only happen once, and if they have happened, then there's nothing we can do to change them.
When he's not explaining what's going on, Lasky will offer alternatives here and there, but he is mostly ignored. He doesn't push the matter because there's that whole avoiding being shot thing. The final countdown was directed by former actor Don Taylor, though his style of directing wasn't considered by producers to be all that exciting. A second unit filmed copious footage of the shipboard operations, and by the end of the film, it looks as though every frame of that footage has made it into the final movie. Filming on an actual vessel with real planes gives this movie production values that cannot be faulted. There is some model footage and some library footage and some shots reused from the movie Tora Tora Tora. The film's major special effects item, the storm. Maurice Binder was best known for creating title sequences for the James Bond movies, and he would create the effects that were quite impressive for a 1980 movie, and they still look great, even if you do know it's just a laser and some dry ice. So I would be careful while watching this movie with your cat in the room. So how is it that a film that was the coolest, bestest and actionist movie when you were 10 is not the coolest, bestest and actionist movie when you're, carry the 3, 29? So obviously, I'm just going to insert whichever compliment best suits. A, wow, you look good for your age. Or B, ooh, what happened? If you happen to think footage of planes taking off and landing makes any movie better, then this is certainly the film for you. Lots of footage of planes taking off and landing. I mean, that's what that hack Orson Welles really needed for Citizen Kane, having Rosebud turn out to be an F-14. But for everybody else whose family still talks to them outside of major holidays, the final countdown does lack some things. That is all the interesting stuff that should be happening in between all the footage of the planes taking off and landing. There's not a lot of interpersonal dynamics between the characters. At the end of the film, Yelland calls Lasky a pain in the ass, yet the extent of Lasky's pain in the assness seems to be answering direct questions and explaining what's going on. Owen and Lasky butt heads, but then they're all really chummy at the end. Dude, remember how I wanted to kill you back when Glenn Miller was making plans for a 1946 tour of the East Coast? Senator Chapman and the Japanese pilot are really the only grit in this very proper atmosphere, and of course they both end up dead.
Oh, God damn it, you can drive yourself crazy just trying to think about this stuff.
So, as for the time travel part of the movie, okay, while it takes a while for the crew to accept what's happened, they do not seem too fazed by the idea that they've actually travelled back in time. There's also little thought as to how do they get back to their own time. Yellen seems a little conflicted, but he doesn't seem to consider too hard what is the correct course of action. They technically would be starting a war if they attack the Japanese first, and at no point does Yellen contact the Navy of 1941 to ask if they would mind if his vessel from the future with relatively godlike powers of destruction stepped in. Lasky and Owen talk a bit about the pros and cons. Yellen just nods and says, well, I guess we should just attack the Japanese fleet. They're all very reactive. Most of that reaction involves moving to another room.
You're talking.
We've got an incredible opportunity here. We know where all the mistakes are going to be made for the next 40 years, and you've got the power to correct them.
It is such a delicious idea, sending the Nimitz up against the Japanese fleet. But the film says, yeah, that's going to be expensive, and so the Storm sends them back to the future, while we will see a fairly messy montage of footage from Tora Tora Tora. The idea of taking modern technology to the past has often been a big thing in movies. I love that one time in the time tunnel when they sent a guy with a machine gun back to the Battle of Troy. But by and large, the idea of time travel is to not change things, at least not to change them in any meaningful way, lest the consequences bite you in the ass. Assuming, of course, that you still have one. Change something in the past and your present may not exist as you expected it. That the idea of fixing something in the past may be stopping the rise of a dictator or even feathering your own nest by trying to enrich yourself in the past. It's just a delicious one, isn't it? Maybe you've already encountered a time travel using future knowledge to correct past mistakes or take advantage of a previously missed opportunity. Maybe a food truck decked out with air fryers turns up at Woodstock.
Let's get this settled once and for all.
Narratively, though, any story that just says, screw it, let's completely upend history in a major way, because, wouldn't it be cool if, is doomed to fail, since one small change could lead to major repercussions.
And if I can never be born, how can I go back in history and meet my very own grandfather?
A major change like, changing the course of World War II by stopping Pearl Harbor could be quite disastrous. The US might not have joined the war in Europe, the Manhattan Project may not have started, the Cold War may not have started, the television series Mission Impossible may never have been made, and given early employment to actor Martin Sheen.
At least we came back to the same world we left.
With the movie only hinting at some of the wider issues, there was realistically no way to have Nimitz take on the Japanese fleet. I mean, man, that would have been extremely cool, but also an extraordinarily bad idea. So the film teases us with 2 jets taking on 2 Zeros, and then the Storm comes back to reset everything without major changes, apart from the half-dozen Nimitz crew who are killed. The movie touches on what is and isn't going on, what they should and shouldn't do, but none of that really affects how things play out.
Could you explain that to me?
No, sir, I can't.
So here we are decades later, arguing over whether a fun movie could have had just a little more meat on the bones.
You have anything to add?
No, sir, not at this time.
Now, I'm not alone in suspecting that there was perhaps more in this film earlier in production, but through all the fun stuff like planes taking off and landing, it does feel like the scripts have been rewritten to be as inoffensive as possible and thus had all of the marrow sucked out of it. Stop. That's not that final countdown.
What the hell's the matter with him?
I'm also going to ruin the cutest and warmest and most human part of the film. So, right at the end, you're Lasky. Your office nemesis gets stuck in 1941 and for 40 years builds up a massive business, employs you without ever letting on that he knows you, sends you on a trip where he knows you'll end up time traveling, and then turns up at the docks when you return from the past just to, rub it in? That said, it is a nice warm touch to the film, in a movie with little warmth.
For Christ's sake, what is this? Some half-assed Princeton debating society.
The final countdown opened in 1980 to ordinary reviews and ordinary box office, where if it made a profit, most of that was likely made from home video and television broadcasts, where I suspect most people would have experienced this film for the first time. Now, it is considered a bit of a minor classic, and not just by those who automagically lionize that decade's media.
Let's not just write off one possible explanation for it because we don't happen to like it.
So, parts of this video will sound like I didn't like the film. No, I do like the film. It's very enjoyable and very easy to watch. But you'd always like a cool premise to be explored just a little more thoroughly and somewhat less superficially. Because otherwise this movie is a bit like buying a magazine and only ever looking at the cover. If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below or check out some of our other videos.